I consider my mother, Kathy Henderson Mitchell, as my hero. My mother was born in Queens, New York, and she's the youngest of 4 children. My mother, being the baby of the family, was very mature for her age. My mom is a very kind-hearted person who will do anything that she possibly can for her family. She learned to do many things at an early age because of her mother's disability. My mother lived with both parents, but her mother had MS, muscular sclerosis, and was confined to a wheelchair. My mother is my hero because of the many obstacles she overcame throughout her life. My mother gave birth to me when she was 16 years old. She struggled to make sure she provided a good life for me. My mother took care of me and cared for my disabled grandmother at the same time. My mother lost both her parents by the age of 26. My grandmother died from MS 4 months after her wedding, and my grandfather died 4 years later. This was a very hard time for my mother. My mother met my stepfather when she was 17 years of age. My mother immediately told him that she had a child because she didn't want him to judge her. My stepfather, who I call my dad, treated me like I was his biological child from the day he started dating my mother. My mother married my stepfather when she was 19 years old. My stepdad is also from Queens, New York. My dad didn't know my mother was as young as she was until 3 days before their wedding. He is 6 years older than her. My mother stated that she didn't tell him because she didn't want him to think she was too young to marry. They have been married now for 37 years. My mother is my hero because of her determination. My stepdad was in the army when they married. He was assigned to an army base in Bad Kreuznach, Germany. My mother wasn't sure that I would make adjustments in Germany, so she decided to leave me with my aunt, her oldest sister, in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I stayed with my aunt for about 1.5 years before I moved with my parents to Germany. This was a really hard time for my mother because she had never been away from her child. She would call me long distance every day just to hear my voice. My mother and I have always been very close. My mother loved living in Germany. She took modeling jobs just for extra money. She would take me shopping to fancy boutiques, and we would always have our girl days. My dad left the army and we moved back to New York. However, the weather was really hard on my health because I had asthma. My mother would take me every week to the clinic for shots and medication. It didn't matter if it was freezing cold, she would walk to pick me up from school to take me to the doctors. My parents eventually decided to move somewhere where the weather was warmer, so we moved to North Carolina. I was the only child for 13 years. My mother tried to have another baby many times when I was younger. However, she experienced multiple miscarriages. When I was 8 years old, she told me she was pregnant, and she was so excited to share her news. Then one day, while getting dressed for school, she experienced extreme pain. My dad came home and rushed her to the hospital. She lost the baby that day. It was very emotional for my mother. She started to lose hope that she couldn't have another child. My mother always looked to God during these hard times. She would always make sure I was happy even when she wasn't. I never knew how much she went through. When I was 13 years old, my mother had my brother. He was a healthy 8-pound baby. During her entire pregnancy, she had to stay off her feet and couldn't work. She was determined to have her baby. My parents moved to Maryland to give my brother and I a better life. When we lived in North Carolina, it was really hard for my mother to find a job in her career. She would take various jobs to make ends meet. After many financial issues in North Carolina, my parents decided to move to Baltimore, Maryland. My mother packed us up in a U-Haul with dinner and snacks, and we took the long 9-hour drive to Maryland. My mother was able to find a job within 2 days of us settling in Baltimore. During that time, she would also work odd jobs taking care of elderly patients at night for extra money. It was really hard for me when I went to college. I was so used to being around my mother and little brother. I was accepted to many schools in other states, but as I was too scared to leave Maryland, I decided to attend the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, just to be close to my mother. I was really depressed my first semester of school because I missed my family. My mother would call me every day at 6:30 a.m. in the morning to make sure I had a good day. At the age of 24, I gave birth to my daughter, Taylor. At first, my mother wasn't happy because I wasn't married, and she didn't want me to have a baby without being married to the father. She was concerned that I would make the same choices as her. This was the first time that we really had a major issue in our relationship. However, my dad came to the rescue and assured my mother that I was making a good decision for my life and that she did a great job raising me. I lived on my own. I had a great job and I graduated from college. My mother and I reconciled after about a month. My daughter Taylor loves her grandmother. They have a very close relationship. My mother believes that her dreams have came true. I am now married and have been married now for about 11 years. I also have 2 beautiful children who were both born on the same day, June 11th, at the same time, 6:45 p.m., and they are 5 years apart. My mother believes that this was a blessing, and she is extremely happy to have such a joyful family. My mother, Kathy Henderson Mitchell, is my hero because she has always placed her family before her needs. She could have taken many wrong paths in her life. However, she decided early on in life that just because she made a mistake as a teenager or she had many personal tragedies in her life, that wouldn't define her future. My mom now has 2 beautiful grandchildren that she adores and still always puts her family first. I salute you, Kathy Mitchell, and I aspire to be the woman you are today. My mother, my hero.